A British expat can live abroad for years, build assets internationally, and still have their estate pulled back into the UK inheritance tax and probate. UK property, domicile exposure, or assets held in personal name can keep your succession tied to the UK rules even when your life is fully international. This is why many expats introduce structures above personal ownership. Instead of assets passing individually, control moves through a defined governance framework that continues across jurisdiction. My name is Shiraz Wahid, and I'm the co-founder at Lepidus Wealth. And in this video, I'm going to explain the most commonly used structures for inheritance planning used by British expats, how they work in practice, when each one is most suitable, and how they fit within a coordinated international strategy. When assets are held in your personal name, succession usually goes through probate before it is transferred to the next generation. For expats with assets in multiple countries, this creates delays, restricted access, and fragmented administration. This becomes more complex for expats because assets may sit in different countries. A UK property may require probate, an overseas bank may request certified documents, an investment platform may restrict access until ownership is confirmed. Each institution applies its own compliance rules. This slows decision making at the exact moment when continuity is needed. Tax exposure may also remain connected to the UK. Domicile status, citus rules, and asset location determines whether UK inheritance tax applies or not. Living abroad does not automatically remove the exposure. If assets remain personally owned, they are typically assessed as part of your estate. Structuring does not eliminate tax automatically, but it can change how ownership is evaluated and how succession occurs. This is why many expats introduce a structure above the personal ownership. Structures such as trust, foundations, or holding companies, and offshore bonds focus on governance, continuity, and coordinated succession across jurisdictions. One of the most established structures for inheritance planning is trust. A trust separates legal ownership from beneficial interest. The trustee holds the assets while beneficiaries are defined according to the trust terms. This allows succession to occur within the trust rather than through probate. For British expats, trusts are often used for centralizing the ownership. Instead of assets passing individually, they sit inside the trust structure. When the settlor dies, the trustee continues to manage the assets according to the trust deed. Control does not stop, and the administrative transition is smoother. However, tax treatment depends on timing, domicile status, and the type of trust used. A trust created while UK domiciled may be treated differently from the one created after non-domicile status is established. Inheritance tax charges can apply on entry, during the life of the trust, or at distribution. This is why coordination with the UK rules is important. Banking consideration also matters. Trustees may open accounts, hold investments, and manage reporting obligations. Some banks require regulated trustees or specific jurisdictions. The structure must therefore be selected with operational practicality in mind, not just the tax considerations. Trusts are typically used where long-term succession planning is required, where multiple beneficiaries are involved, or where control needs to remain structured across generations. Common jurisdictions include UK Resident Trust for holding UK assets and coordinating local inheritance planning, Jersey for establishing trustee oversight and strong court recognition, the Isles of Man for cost-efficient administration, and the Cayman Islands or British Virgin Islands where flexible structuring and international investment holding are required. Some expats prefer foundations instead of a trust. A foundation is a separate legal entity that holds assets in its own name. Unlike a trust, there is no trustee layer providing independent oversight. Governance is handled through the Foundation Council and regulations instead. Governance is defined through a charter and regulations. This structure can simplify recognition in civil law jurisdictions. Some countries are more familiar with foundation entities rather than a trust relationship. A foundation may therefore provide smoother interaction with banks, property registries, and corporate ownership records. For inheritance planning, a foundation allows control to transition through its governance body. The founder can define how decisions are made, who oversees distribution, and how beneficiaries are treated. When the founder dies, the foundation continues to exist, and the assets remain inside the structure, are not part of personal probate. Tax treatment on these assets again depends on domicile, residency, and how assets are contributed. A foundation does not automatically remove UK inheritance tax exposure. The analysis depends on whether assets are considered transferred, retained, or indirectly controlled. Proper structuring and timing are important. Foundations are often used where governance clarity is important, where English common law governance is preferred, or where families want an entity-based structure rather than a trust relationship. ownership. Structures such as ADGM and DIFC Foundation are commonly used by British expats because they provide a regulated common law environment, flexible governance rules, and easier coordination with international banks and holding companies. Another common approach is introducing a holding company above assets. Instead of transferring each asset into a trust or a foundation directly, ownership is centralized inside a corporate vehicle. This company can then be owned by a trust, foundation, or directly by individuals depending on the strategy. A holding company can simplify administration. Investment accounts, property, and operating businesses can all be owned by one entity. When succession occurs, control of the entity transfers rather than each underlying asset. This reduces fragmentation and improves governance. For British expats, holding companies are often combined with other structures. For example, a foundation may own the holding company, which in turn own the investments and property. This layering allows separation between governance and asset ownership. It also improves banking clarity because institutions interact with a corporate vehicle. Tax implications depends on the residency of the company, management and control, and underlying assets. A holding company alone does not remove inheritance tax exposure. However, when coordinated with a trust or a foundation, it can form part of a broader planning framework. This layered ownership is commonly used when multiple assets exist, where governance is required, or where cross-border administration needs to be simplified. Common holding company jurisdictions include ADGM and DIFC for regulated common law ownership and banking familiarity, the British Virgin Islands or Cayman Islands for flexible investment holding, and UK companies where domestic assets or UK financing are involved. Another structure often used in British expat inheritance planning is an offshore investment bond. This is a life insurance-based wrapper that holds investment portfolios inside a policy structure. Instead of holding funds directly, the investment sits within the bond, and ownership is defined through the policy. For inheritance planning, offshore bonds can simplify succession. The policy can be assigned, split, or placed into a trust. This allows control to transition without selling the underlying investment. The asset remains invested while ownership changes at the policy level. The tax treatment depends on the residency, domicile, and how withdrawals are structured. Offshore bonds do not automatically remove UK inheritance tax as well. If personally owned, they may still form part of your estate. However, when combined with trust or foundation, they can sit within a broader inheritance planning framework. Offshore bonds are also used for administrative efficiencies. Multiple investments can sit inside one wrapper. Reporting is centralized and portfolio changes can occur within the policy. This can simplify cross-border management, especially when beneficiaries live in different jurisdictions. The bond can then sit inside a trust or a foundation, allowing ownership to transition without disrupting the underlying investment. Life insurance is another common tool used alongside structures. The life insurance policy creates liquidity so inheritance tax can be paid without selling assets. Whole of life policies are commonly used for permanent inheritance tax exposure. The cover remains in place for life and the payout is designed to match the expected inheritance tax liability. Beneficiaries can settle tax while property, businesses, and portfolios remain intact. Term life insurance is typically used where exposure is temporary. This may apply during domicile transition while restructuring is implemented or where liability exists for a defined period. The cover runs for a fixed term and protects the estate while risk remains. These policies are often written into trust, so proceeds sits outside the estate and are available quickly. The objective is liquidity, continuity, and avoiding forced sales of assets while succession is completed. In practice, inheritance tax planning for British expats rarely relies on a single structure. Different assets may require different treatment. UK property, international investments, and operating businesses each have their own legal and tax consideration. A combined structure might include a foundation for governance, a holding company for ownership, and insurance for liquidity. Alternatively, a trust may hold a corporate structure. The design depends on domicile status, asset location, and family objective. Coordination between jurisdictions is essential. A structure effective in one country must also be recognized elsewhere. Banking providers must also accept the ownership chain. Tax reporting must align across locations. Without coordination, complexity increases instead of reducing. Timing also matters. Structures introduced early allows clearer separation between personal estate and governed assets. Late restructuring may trigger tax consequences or administrative complications. Planning is therefore usually more effective when implemented earlier. The objective is to create continuity. When structured properly, control transfers smoothly. Assets continue to be managed and beneficiaries avoid delays and confusion. So if you are a British expat and want to understand which structure is suitable for your inheritance planning, you can request a personalized inheritance structuring plan using the link in the description below. That's it for today and I will see you in the next video.